You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
Well, everybody loved it when you did the intro, so you can do it again.
They did?
Yeah.
What do you mean? What did people say?
I was just telling you that. No one said anything.
That's why I questioned it. Welcome to the 21.5 Show, the podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots.
If you're new to the show, my name is Dylan. I'm one of the hosts. I am a pilot on Challenger 604, representing business aviation on this microphone.
And I'm Max. I am a professional pilot on a Citation XLS, as well as an airline pilot. It's a long story, but it is what it is.
The 121 perspective. Hey, so you know how we talk about, especially with Part 91 pilots, a lot of the responsibility for challenging yourself during training is kind of on you. You know, you can be a slacker if you want. There is a cool thread on Pro Pilot World I just came across where people posted their suggestions on what to do with extra sim time. And like they actually came up with some cool scenarios.
Huh.
I thought that's kind of
that is cool.
That's a cool resource because, you know, if you went through that and read a few, you could, I think especially, you know, for you could tailor it towards your operation. But I thought there was that's a really cool database to have.
That is really cool.
So I'll have a link in the show notes so you can check that out. You do have to be a Pro Pilot World member, which we highly recommend.
Of course.
Being anyways. But yeah, you can have some good
Not
ideas.
just for the chicken recipes.
That's right. Oh, that's right. Just once you join Pro Pilot World,
search Athenian chicken.
And then after that, search extra sim time.
Yeah. What's the other one? The spicy one?
Volcano
I don't
chicken
know.
maybe or something. It's really hot. I don't know. There's some good recipes on there as well. So today's show is going to be really cool. So you remember a few episodes ago, we did that episode on the crop dusting, and
My boy Ken.
That's right.
Just talked to him yesterday.
Yeah, and people loved it. They're like, we love hearing from pilots that are doing interesting and unique jobs. So we've got another one for you today, and this one is even more interesting and unique.
Yeah, we hit the nail on the head. I'll just say that.
So our friend and my former somehow student from Embry-Riddle, Bill Bayless, West Coast chief pilot on the Goodyear Blimp, is going to join us to talk a little bit about all things lighter than air.
Yeah. What an interesting gig.
Yeah, so you guys are going to love that. We had a million questions, so we jump around a little bit because
we're just going
hold
nuts.
on, wait a minute.
Wait, how does this work? What's superheat?
So anyway. You have that to look forward to. But before we do that, let's. Some folks wrote some reviews. We got to send out a bunch of stickers to everybody that's been writing reviews lately. So if you write a review for the show, send us a note with your mailing address. I'll shoot you a few 21.5 stickers. And we had a couple come in. I'll let you read this first one.
Great balance. Some aviation podcasts get too far in the weeds. Some are too weekend warrior, but this one hits the right balance. From Cardinal RG Pilot.
Yes,
I like that.
I like it. Actually, you got to read this one too because you're going to love this one. Have you seen? I don't think you've seen this.
No.
Okay. The title is PA, so I think he's referencing that PA we played on the last.
Captain George or whatever his name. That guy. I've been an avid and podcast listener for decades. Thousands of hours of material consumed, and my seasoned ear has been attuned to the highest quality shows across 6 continents. Rest assured, your review will go smooth under my complete command and control. How do I binge on so many shows? 2 things. Let the FO practice. While being PIC, I slip an earbud under the headset. And faster listening speeds. Yes, sir. Real-time listening is beyond and beneath me like the rest of the crew on board this smoker. As I progressed in skill, even 1.5 speed was not enough, much like Mach 7.8 speed assignment. Your 2 times podcast is under the ever-listening ear of a true professional. I would recommend 2 times speed for this podcast to 2 groups of people. If you grow wary of incessantly long introductions, banter just this side of dignity, and tumble promos, you have the ability to get that shortcut and arrive at the gate 3 minutes early.
I think he means Tumblr promos.
Oh, Tumblr. What did I say?
Oh, he wrote tumble, but
Oh.
I think he meant tumbler.
Secondly, to those who do enjoy the gasping for air laughter and the sweet melodies of the furlough flute, it's another experience at 2 times. Simultaneous concern and amusement for Max and Dylan emerge at what sounds like 2 highly caffeinated hyenas. The 2 times flute, however, soothes the soul on layover and would give Ron Burgundy a run for his pilot stash and Delta-esque suit. You have me to thank either for saving you turbulence for some extra onboard entertainment. And do you thank me later, passengers? I'll be at the cabin door after landing, taking credit for good landings and basking in your awe and affection. Weather in Scottsdale is forecast to be warm, 85 and sunny. Light winds out of the east. You know who that sounds like?
Who?
Roy. That sounds like something
I
Roy
wonder
would
what did Roy. Yeah, I don't know. Well, the name is Moon KSU. So whoever you are, Moon KSU, identify yourself. We might have to award some extra
immediately
swag.
identify yourself. That's the best.
That was a top review. I wonder it's how many. It's like 5 paragraphs long. I wonder if someone actually.
That was a true tapestry of language.
Yeah,
just a cornucopia of humor and
show references.
Yeah, show references.
I love it.
That's like what a Howard Stern listener would have written.
Right,
you know?
exactly.
Like,
I think we've
listened to I think a lot of the shows.
The good news is it only took half the time for him to get through it because it's a 2X. It's great. Up next, it's the Mailbag, sponsored by our friends at the Advanced Aircrew Academy. All of the training courses that your flight department required, you can find at aircrewacademy.com. They have an incredible catalog of offerings and a blog. Have you ever checked that blog out?
I have. There's some very good nuggets of information on that.
I think the winter ops stuff is going to be coming out extremely hot here pretty soon, or extremely cold.
However you want to look at it.
That's right. You're going to have to now that you announced you're going back to the dark side, a lot of that stuff it's less thought, I would say, for the Type 4 and the Type 1 and the holdover
There's
chart.
a whole app for it, dude. You just go in there and you type. Yeah, it's incredible.
What?
Yeah.
So you say like, oh, I'm doing this brand.
Yeah, it's new for me, and I haven't completed the distance learning segment on cold weather operation, so I don't really want to get grilled right now about this. But I know there is an app, and you tap it, and like it just does.
Hey Siri, what's my holdover time? Oh, I'm so jealous. Well, for the rest of us who don't have an app, brush up on your cold weather knowledge. Check out those holdover charts. A little late refresher training from our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy. You can check it out, aircrewacademy.com. On to the mailbag. This is from Chris. He'd emailed us a little while ago, and he had gotten back into the cockpit. He had some cancer issues and then was able to get back into the cockpit.
Yeah.
He emailed us about his first trip. And he goes, I just had my first trip back on the line. LOL. It was amazing. A deadhead to a red eye that canceled. The next day was a double deadhead offline to get us back on our trip. All this with a captain that would not stop talking about vaccine mandates. Anyways, great to be back, Chris.
See, Chris is crushing, though, because I still ascertain the key to being a successful and happy airline pilot is all in your attitude.
I thought it was all in the noise canceling headset.
No, you just don't get in the weeds and get upset about things you can't control. Like I purposely just don't read stuff. Like it's getting negative. I'm like, I'm done.
Like the instructions on the icing app.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, welcome back, Chris. I'm sure that'll be the last captain that'll be talking your ear off.
Don't worry about that. That's few and far between.
They never
from what I hear, anyway.
Next email is from our friend Brian. He says, I haven't seen any layover guides lately, so I figured I'd put one in. I just finished about 3 months in Albuquerque. Was he working for Walter White? I don't know. 3 months. So here's a selection of places that aren't on the normal New Mexican food list. You can find Tex-Mex New Mexican pretty easily. I also didn't include hotels, as I didn't stay in any that weren't chain. And where I did stay was in line with its brand and as expected. The only other urgent PIREP, unfortunately, car-related crimes are pretty high in the city, so try not to use any hotels near the airport unless it's on the airport property. Basically, avoid the Gibson-Yale intersection. I had my rental car stolen out of the parking lot at my hotel down there. Wish there was a story, but nope, just woke up and a new car was parked in my spot. Keep up the great work, Brian.
I've had that happen before.
Rental car stolen?
No, just woke up and a new car was in my spot.
Oh, yeah.
It's just because it got towed. It went in Europe. We couldn't read the sign, and we parked like at a bus stop. It was so funny. We were in Spain, and we had to go like down to this like basement parking garage and pull it out of the impound with the cops and the whole thing, trying to speak to us.
The gendarmes.
Yeah.
No, that's French, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the wrong country, but we know what you meant.
Pikesman. Anyways, Brian, thank you. We will have a link to that guide as well for Albuquerque. Now, I use that one because I actually go to Albuquerque, so I'm excited to check that one out. Last email on a more serious note is from superfan Dave, who's been on our show many times, and he wanted to follow up with our conversation with James. If you want to read this one.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, gents. Just finished listening to your recent podcast with James and had a couple of thoughts. James always has some interesting points and, of course, is on the front line of interviewing and hiring, so I like hearing his perspective. One thing he neglected to mention was the effect all the buyouts that the airlines offered to their workforce during COVID have not been factored into the numbers. This will only cause the need for pilots to be higher than previously expected. I remember the 1980s when if you had a pilot's license, the majors were pursuing you. Many 500-hour pilots found work with every major airline, and if you were a woman or minority, you could be hired with less flight time. The same environment exists with the squeeze of the 1,200 or 1,500-hour regulated minimum flight time, creating a larger feeding frenzy. I say this to point out that I believe the hiring process will be adjusted to take less qualified pilots with the belief that their system will protect the airline from weak pilots. Will this cause the need for James's services be truly needed, as it will be almost impossible to screw up an interview with the need? How does all this affect business aviation is the question, and the answer is not good. There will be a large sucking sound from our ranks and lots of movement across, causing business flight departments to scramble to hire qualified pilots. I think safety will take an even larger hit and insurance will continue skyrocketing. That's from Dave.
Remains to be seen, because as we know, I think if all things remain constant, we keep trending in that direction. He's not wrong, but things also change.
It never
like
is.
That in this
That's
business.
the thing, is that it's never as good as it seems or as bad as it seems usually. But I think he's right. Like if we were to stay on this trajectory.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and just even in the near term, like the next 6 months, when you look at the numbers that all the airlines are planning to hire in 2022,
right,
it's staggering. Like, we can see it. I know of it already at our airport. I know multiple people that are interviewing at airlines like right now.
We'll sell those names. For
it's going to be, there's going to be a shakeup for sure in the near term. Long term, it's aviation, man.
Get that pilot's license.
Right now, the music's playing and we're all walking around the chairs. But
yes,
as soon as it starts, it always stops.
That's right.
The flute,
is
around the corner.
Well, I'm going to play this for our boy that's listening at 2 times speed because he says it's. Here, you pick one. The flute
finish on that
it's a masterpiece.
Divine.
The flute may be in the case, but it's still being cleaned. It's still out there.
It's always ready.
Just keep that in mind. If things are too good to be true, look out.
Don't forget.
That's right. Oh, that's the long one. Well, we'll use this music to celebrate our friend John S., who made a donation on the website and purchased the second to last can cooler. Only one more to go. If you go to 215podcast.com and scroll to the bottom, there's the donate button. You can click that for $60. You can be the person who buys the last one. We will play this music when you do it.
Congratulations, John. Lucky you. Your beers aren't getting warm. Okay. We got to get out of this.
That's enough. That's enough of that. All right. Let's turn the soundboard off. All right. Up next, flight advice. But before, how about some flight advice for our listeners, Max?
Do you find yourself up late at night wondering what would happen if I wasn't able to obtain my first or second class medical next time? Do you find yourself staring into the abyss, wondering what life without a medical certificate would be like? If so, Harvey Watt Insurance is for you.
HarveyWatt.com.
They're the largest provider of loss of license insurance for pilots all around the world.
Don't forget about their life insurance offering.
They also offer a very attractive life insurance policy specifically for professional pilots.
There's almost no exclusions.
HarveyWatt.com.
Protect your certificates.
Side effects may be diarrhea, vomiting, stomach cramps, and an ability to sleep and rest soundly, knowing you're protected.
All right, that's.
All right.
I don't know if they're going to pay us for that one. That one might be a freebie. We'll see. Let us know, Rob. Okay, so we actually do have some flight advice here from a young airman. We seem to be getting a lot of these types of questions. Says, thank you again for all the hard work that you guys put into this podcast. I have 2 conditional job offers from Envoy and Skywest. I know the contracts for both airlines and have mentors to talk to for both companies. Orientation class date is December 15th with Envoy, and I have an E-175 class with Skywest in January. I will be living in Tampa, Florida, knowing that with Envoy, I have a remote chance of a Miami base assignment. Would you commute for Skywest with no Florida domicile forever? Well, you plan on working.
We know what he means.
Yeah. Or would you roll the dice with Envoy for the chance of a Miami domicile? I'm thinking with the American network, it would be easier to commute out of Tampa initially till I get to Miami. I understand that I may have to wait to get a shot to bid in 2 or 3 years when bidding for captain, as cadets will probably suck up all the 175 classes, and I am a non-cadet. The reason for this is Miami doesn't have Embraer 145s, and getting that out of class gets me stuck in a seat lock until captain. Ooh. Moving away from Tampa isn't an option. I wish it were. I am an Air Force reservist, non-pilot, with many airline pilots in my unit, so recommendations are plentiful. One big one is with Frontier. My ultimate goal is to get some 121 time, find the company with the fastest upgrades, and move on to I think he means ULCC, with a junior Florida domicile. Hope this message finds you, and thank you for all you guys do.
Well, I am strongly against commuting, as you know, but this is different. Certainly this is not a forever job. Right. And it seems, we don't necessarily know the seniority breakdown and everything, but it seems to indicate that while there's light at the end of the tunnel for Miami, it's a long tunnel. Is that kind of the feel you're getting?
Yeah. He makes it sound like it's going to be multiple years.
And even then, but that being said, we also talk about everyone's like, oh, I'm just going to be here not that long, just a couple years, and I'll bang out and go to the U.S. And then the music stops and you could be rocking it for quite some time. So I always hesitate to condemn yourself to a life of commuting. Like, you're going to commute at some point if you're an airline pilot for the most part. I wasn't based in Phoenix when I first got hired at Southwest.
Right.
And I got very lucky and I got based in Phoenix soon, but it could be a long time, and I got displaced from Phoenix now. So it's just part of the gig, but I think having light at the end of the tunnel is important. And especially if he's utilizing the American network to commute to Envoy, it seems like that would those usually mesh better together, commute, right?
I would say it's the online commute that you would look at. I think Envoy's still wholly owned by Americans. So you're treated as an American employee versus, at Skywest where you're not.
So you're a little better priority.
Yeah. So I would say that would probably tip it for me also, Envoy. Here's one element, and I imagine it's the same. I get what you're saying. Like, we got to make sure that our seat is safe when the music stops. But let's say the music doesn't stop and it cranks. Will you be flying the same amount at both carriers in a best case scenario? What's going to really set you up to make that jump to Frontier or wherever you want to go? Yeah. Sounds like kind of Frontier is what he's leaning towards. What's going to set you up quickest to get there?
Well, it's upgrade time is what we're talking, right? essentially.
I think so. It sounds like it, yeah.
No regional, you don't fly more than the other. I mean, it's all kind of.
Well, I mean, but he may not even have to upgrade. There are, in this current environment, especially.
So then what's the difference? I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Like,
you have to make the assumption he's not going to get stuck on reserve for the next year.
Right.
I mean, things are
going to be busy.
Enough
so I also think you've got to think best case scenario too, of where you're going to fly and you know, you're going to need a crash pad. Where's that going to be easier? Those are some considerations.
Yeah, where
too.
are you most likely to be based?
Where are you most likely?
Some places are tougher than other. I mean, I remember Chicago sometimes was tough to commute to, and the weather, but there was good public transportation, tons of crash pads. It was easy, you know. So
one other thought I would give you, especially because Skywest is West Coast time for the most part, a lot of their domiciles are to the West. One of the things that really, really made it difficult for me is when I was based in a different time zone than I lived. That made it really hard on my home life because you're basically splitting your time evenly. So I would be at home and I was living on the West Coast, but then flying on the East Coast. And I mean, those early morning departures were tough. Brutal. You've really got out of sync with your family. And it sounds like you've got obviously some type of family or personal ties where you're living. So you're probably going to be doing that. So that's just another thing to think about. So
plus Envoy's such a more east of the Mississippi airline that seems like that would go better. So without knowing all the info, I'd say Envoy is probably the way to go, right?
Yeah, I would.
All right.
I would
the
agree.
other thing I think is interesting about this email is it kind of solidifies you as a bit of a prophet, because I remember you saying before how people are changing the way they look at ULCCs and looking at it as like a destination, last stop career gig. And
here's a guy is looking at that. And I think he's smart because Tampa's going to be I think Tampa's a base for Frontier, especially. So it's got a good setup.
Spirit's also a big Florida operation.
Right. I know. So I think there's some really good options there. So.
All right. Good stuff.
Good stuff. That's crazy. I mean, can you ever think about us thinking about that when we were trying to get hired at a regional?
No.
We were never thinking about any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. So that's our flight advice. We answered nothing. The advice is worth exactly what you paid for it. But keep sending them in. We've got the anonymous form. It's on our website, 215podcast.com. You can send it in or shoot us an email, info@215podcast.
All right.
Let's do it.
Let's get to it. Let's get to this Bill Bayless interview.
Here we go. Our friend Bill Bayless is joining us. Chief pilot, West Coast. I mean, we keep it West Coast here.
Obviously.
On the Goodyear Blimp. An amazing.
I can't wait. I've been waiting for this interview for a while.
So many questions. Welcome to the program, Bill.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Is blimp pilot the correct term? Is it airship captain? Like, let's get the nomenclature right, first of all.
It's either blimp pilot or airship pilot.
And no mention of lighter than air? Is that like not a cool thing to say, or?
That's if you get into the kind of the aviation technical stuff. So there's a lighter than air airship rating added to my airline transport pilot certificate.
All right.
Okay.
Let's just start at the beginning, Bill.
Let's
go. And how did you get to here?
So I was similar to you guys. I did the Riddle Prescott route and
Go Eagles.
Went through all that training, all the ratings and all that stuff. And trying to what got me on the route was back when I was going through the program, senior capstone course was in an Airbus A320 sim and did about 10 hours in that and just kind of decided I didn't really like autopilot. You know, it's just an opinion of mine. I didn't want to watch a computer fly. So, you know, I got into the flight instructor route and I did that for quite a while. I did 6 years and, you know, taught all the courses and got into the standards, you know, check rides, all that stuff. And I was looking for jobs. And we had a college career, you know, message board. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was Eagle Hire or something like that. But I saw a job pop up and it said Goodyear Blimp pilot. And, you know, I thought, I bet that thing doesn't have autopilot. So went through started flying and it was quite the process. Thankfully, it's improved since when I went through, but it ended up being about 8 to 10 months of interviews. And in total, It was 8 interviews.
You're kidding me.
So you go through, you know, phone screens. We did some Skypes. When that was a thing, and 3 in-person interviews at all the different bases, you know, Akron, Florida, California. And the first round, I didn't end up getting hired. So it was for the Florida position. So rarely do the positions for Goodyear Blimp pilot open. So it's just basically wherever we need a pilot, whether it's based in Ohio, Florida, or California. So this one was for Florida. I went through the process, went through 7 interviews, and they actually told me I made it to the final two, and the other guy ended up getting it. I wasn't the best fit for Florida, which I would agree with that now. Anyways, so after that, I decided, all right, well, I'll get my ATP 61. I did that in the Diamond Twin Star and got hired on with Horizon. And oddly enough, guess who called the first day of ground school in Portland?
It's always the way it goes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you guys know with the staggering for sim availability and stuff, I started ground school on a Friday up in Portland, and they called that day. Like, okay, well, they flew me out the next day, Saturday, down to California for that last and final interview with the team there. And then the next week, obviously going through ground school and just the in-dock and into the system. So they called me later that week and got the job offer. And of course, with big companies like that, you go through the background check, the drug screen, all that stuff. And that takes, anywhere, usually about 2 weeks or so. So, obviously being the prudent pilot, I'm going to stick around and go through the training and see what happens. And I actually remember that the day, it's just quite an easy day to remember. It was September 11th, back about 8 years ago. And they called, and I was in a loft scenario sim with, a couple partners and instructors. And I got the call and I knew what it was about. I knew it was my prior boss, and said, hey, can you guys pause this sim? I got to take this. So I ran out to the hall and took the call, got offered the job, and kind of came back in. They're like, hey, man, is everything okay? Like, is your family all right? You kind of left in a hurry, man. Are you all right? Like, well, guys, I kind of need to talk to the chief pilot about resigning. Like, dude, what is going on, man? What's wrong? Like, kind of just got hired to fly the Goodyear Blimp. And they all go, what? That's awesome. Like, geez, man. But, I could have been the, one of those guys and just gone the rest of the day, jump seated home and then called the next day, but you don't burn bridges in aviation. And
right.
I did the rug dance and handed in the books and manual and bought a ticket back to Phoenix because my stuff was still in Prescott at the time. So that was the story.
Wow. And I mean, you should have just walked back in and been for that loft and been like, this is part of the scenario. And just looked at the instructor. Very good. I guess that's one of those things, like when you say, I'm going to fly the Goodyear Blimp, there's no other response than like, cool.
Yeah. What did the chief pilot say? Like, hey, I need to resign. What did he say?
He's like, well, are you sure about this? And I'm pretty sure, I can always come back here, but it's usually...
You say, this opportunity will probably come by again. You're right. Maybe I should stick around.
There's tons of blimps out there. It's no big deal.
Right.
Wow. Okay. So you get hired at Goodyear. I imagine you didn't have any like lighter than air training beforehand, right? I mean, they got to do this. Let the guy
finish. I said start from the beginning.
Okay.
He started.
All right. Okay.
Let him go.
Okay. Go ahead.
We don't want to hear
pretty much it.
Well, no, you got hired. Now what happened?
All right. Well, so you get hired. So I might as well cover that stuff, for it doesn't require any lighter than air experience, even hot air balloon, none of that. So we hire pilots. You have, your ATP commercial, could be fixed wing, could be rotor wing. We typically like a couple thousand hours. Flight instructor certs are really good too, because you're probably going to end up teaching, and whether it's on the ground or in the air, maybe one day. So you come in with that. And, the interview process, kind of getting into that's, subjective, objective. We can teach pretty much anyone how to fly the thing. It's, as with a lot of jobs, it's the fit within the organization. It's a very, very unique job. You're working with a lot of different personalities and, different job types, and you're operating. It's not the same as like, flying jets and stuff where you don't really see them that often, once in a while, but you see these guys every day. When we're traveling with this thing across the United States, that could be a month-long trip, could be 3 months, could be 6 months. You're always with them. They're family away from home. So That's kind of part of the fit thing. But once you're hired on, you just get thrown into training. There's no simulators for blimps. So it's all on the job training. And everyone asks, well, why not? They've got helicopters, airplanes. It's more of just the fundamentals of aerostatics and the effects, the environmental and atmospheric effects on an airship in flight. So it's very hard to replicate. So the example I always give with that is, say something as simple as the sun going behind a cloud bank. Well, you get heavier just like that. And of course, that changes all your flight characteristics. You climb into warm air, you descend into cold air. It changes your static weight like that. It's not so much fuel burn. It's a lot of what we call superheat, which is the the temperature difference between outside the envelope and inside. So,
Wow.
So you train, you don't actually go out and do like training flights. You just hop in on day-to-day normal operations and you train that way?
all of the above. So you come on as a pilot, we'll send you up pretty much anytime we can. So there's a variety of missions, obviously cross country. If we're headed up to say San Francisco to cover whatever NBA game, you're going to get experience on that. Passenger operations, not so much off the bat. We do usually use 2 pilots on passengers, one's acting kind of as the flight attendant, answering all the pilot type questions where one pilot actually flies the thing. And then TV events, pretty much it's a guarantee we're going to send you up on just about every single TV event that we can put you up on just to get experience. So remember, with what we do, we invented live aerial coverage back in 1955, Pasadena, California, Rose Parade, Rose Bowl. So we were the first to provide live aerial coverage from the sky. So that's kind of our bread and butter with, how we represent the brand and marketing wise. So we're going to send you up and get you experience on all the variety of TV events, whether it's something that's a little bit easier. Everyone always asks me, why do you do closed stadium events?
That was on my list of questions.
Yeah, I've heard them all. But, it's setting the scene. So the ease in and out of commercial breaks, we're in a great spot here. You've got Hollywood sign, beaches, sunsets. It's a great way to ease in and out. And of course, that shot everyone loves. It sets the scene of where this big event, whether it's sports or entertainment or whatever's taking place.
Right. It's the same trick they use in movies a lot of time. That's like an establishing shot, showing this New York City or whatever. So then at some point when you've been trained, do you have to go up with an FAA resource? There's got to be like one person that can give you a check ride and give you your...
Yeah. So kind of just quickly outlining kind of the training program. We've got a lot of ex-airline guys. So we've kind of structured it into 3 stages, similar to kind of the professional pilot track, if you want to call it that. So we bring you on, like I said, we're sending you up as much as we can to get you experience in the seat. It takes about a year to train a pilot how to fly this thing, about 200 to 300 hours in the seat before you're really, really comfortable. Just experience all the different conditions. And, your first year during that, all training, we're going to send you wherever the blimp's operating. If one's in maintenance, say here in California, we'll send you out to Florida and get some experience in some higher winds, reinforced sea breezes and, maybe some thunderstorm activity that you need to think about. So we'll send you everywhere. But these 3 stages, this first stage is kind of like basic flight training. We're going to send you through, we've got a CPT, cockpit procedure trainer. You learn your flows. We've got a QRH, just like a lot of transport category jets. I mean, this ship that I fly is certified under the EASA kind of airline spec. So that's kind of the training that we went after for that. So your pre-flight checks, your flows, the run-up systems checks are quite extensive in one of these things. So bringing a new pilot on, at first, I can say when I came in, it's like you think you're a pilot, good ATP, and just about know everything, what's going on. And, I recognize that, but get in an airship, there's a bunch of things like, I don't know what that does. I don't know what that does. So, the run-up systems checks when you're a new pilot on this thing take about an hour to an hour and a half.
Oh, geez.
Once we get you to the end of that stage, into stage 2, which is kind of getting into the landings, and get you down to probably closer to 30 minutes. But it's, extensive checks, not only just mag checks, but, you do hydraulic checks, thrust checks, the flight control checks, which you need a crew chief to do because they're 200 feet behind you. You can't see them. So you go through that. Like I said, stage 2 is landing. So we have different types of landings, not only heavy landings, you've got light landings, and then what we call EQ landings. So EQ for equilibrium. So where the airship weighs nothing. So you're vectored up and you're kind of in and out of reverse, in and out of beta, trying to get this thing to set down nicely. Lighter than air. This thing can land up to 200 kilograms lighter than air. So you actually have to vector up and kind of, as we say, suck it down to the ground. So you're using reverse thrust to push you down. When you're lighter than air, you can hold it on the ground when you're lighter than air, and they get a bunch of ballast on to keep you on the ground. And then how we typically fly. So those are the variety of landings, but how we typically fly is slightly heavier than air. So, it wants to come down, but you're kind of just like a normal airplane or helicopter using the thrust to augment the weight. And then stage 3 is all your abnormals and emergencies. So kind of, we have the same kind of training outline as most, corporate or airline ops. So we go through proficiency checks every year. Same kind of stuff, simulated fires, engine failures. You actually get shown in training that you can land this thing with one engine of the 3 operating. It's a pretty impressive piece of engineering.
Wow. So can you talk a little bit? I mean, I don't really understand the systems or anything. Can you talk about, let's start simple. I'm picturing a blimp like in a movie, and I feel like it's a huge steering wheel, like from obviously that's not really, is it a yoke or like, what's the controls like?
Well, you're right. In the old ones, the old technology, straight out of the 1920s, we've been flying these things around the country for 100 years now. And we've built over, I think it's just over 330. And these were used extensively in the U.S. Military during the World Wars. Started with the balloons, observation balloons in World War II.
Yeah.
These blimps, before the British invented radar, blimps were radar. So, you can stay aloft for long periods of time, 1,500 feet above the water, and they spotted subs and, enemy ships, U-boats, whatever. They did the search and rescue and stuff. But they escorted some 90,000 U.S. vessels during the war years, and not one, or maybe one out of those was lost when escorted by a blimp.
Wow.
So they're very useful. But moving forward with the kind of the technology, we operated the previous model. There's half of our current pilots now flew the last model, which is the GZ-20 Alpha. A little bit louder than this, a little bit smaller. That was a true blimp. So I'll kind of designate the 3 types here of airship. There's a blimp, which was the older model that they're now retired. They're all in museum, the GZ-20 Alpha. GZ stands for Goodyear Zeppelin. So a true blimp is there's no air, there's no internal structure above you. It's just air and helium that makes up the envelope. And there's, a catenary curtain that supports the gondola, which has the engines attached to it. Our current model, spoiler, yes, our current model is technically not a blimp. It's a semi-rigid airship.
Ooh.
So of course we're going to keep the blimp name because that's what everyone knows.
Right.
Goodyear semi-rigid airship doesn't really roll off the tongue, but semi-rigid airship. So there's a carbon fiber and aluminum framework that runs from nose to tail in our ship, and that's what supports the engines up, mid-envelope by the Goodyear branding. And then of course all the internal fuel tanks and electrical work, and supports the gondola and the landing gears fore and aft. And then there's the rigid airship. You remember those? I always get asked about Hindenburg, of course, almost 800 feet long, so 3 times as long as ours. Goodyear built a couple of those, USS Akron, USS Macon, back in the 30s, about the same size, I think 785 feet long. And they basically had an aluminum framework, and they had gas bags that they put inside to provide that static lift. So those are kind of the 3 types.
So the current one, is the gas just is it in bags, or is it held within the rigid structure and then the skin?
It's within the bag. So the helium and the air makes the shape around that framework. But if, we have to take all the helium out once a year as part of our continuous or progressive airworthiness program. So we take all the helium out, inspect all the internals once a year, and that has to be done in a hangar. We hang it from the ceiling. We put the helium into nurse, but kind of just the general operation of airships. So all airships, that includes all of them, whether it's semi-rigid or the old blimp model, there's what's called ballonets. So it's just another word for balloon. So you have to imagine inside the blimp, there's 2 smaller airbags, so to speak, or ballonets, we call them. And those are filled with air. So that's how we compensate for the constant changes in pressure and temperature, whether it's on the ground or flying. So we inflate and deflate or pull air out of those ballonets constantly flying around the ground. And that maintains the pressure.
Is there an automatic system that does that to give you like a neutral buoyancy, or is it all?
We have BCU. It's a very electric airship. So a ballonet control unit that somewhat does it automatically, but it not completely, so the pilot's always choosing ballonet you want to pull air out of depending on trim. So trim for landing, you think about that as like fuel, the jet can move around fuel fore and aft, and kind of set your trim. We do that with fuel and air. So if you trimmed wrong in an airship, it's going to be nose heavy. Obviously, the other side of that is you can be tail heavy if you trim too much aft. So it's so much of a feel thing flying airships, and that's one of the reasons I enjoy it so much. It's really never the same. No 2 takeoffs and landings and an airship are ever the same. It's all feel the wind, feel the weight. It's one of the reasons you can't really simulate it.
Right.
So just looking at the website where they talk about the blimps, it says the motors are 200 horsepower. It doesn't say if they're like reciprocating or turboprops or what are they?
Just a specialized 172 engine. They're like Ming IO 360s. It's the Charlie 1 Golf 6 model. So it's specifically adapted, of course, to a Zeppelin NT. So they're the same thing, 4-cylinder piston under low lead. But they're geared to these huge props. They look tiny on our 250-foot long Airship. Those are 9-foot diameter composite props. So they're very efficient, and you don't need a lot of power to provide thrust. Helium does a lot of the lifting for us, just under 300,000 cubic feet of it. That's probably about 1.5 million, 2 million birthday balloons worth. But these engines are geared down from the normal, 2,800 RPM down to about 1,200 on the sides.
So you have an engine on each side, and you said there's 3 engines total, right?
Yep. 2 of the side engines, which are fully vectoring, forward, reverse thrust, and vectoring from 0 to 120 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And then we have an aft engine that is geared to 2 propellers. So we have what we call a lateral fan, which is kind of think of that as like a stern thruster on a boat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we can correct for the wind shifts there. And then we have a vertical prop, which, as we're flying dynamically, similar to an airplane, that's vectored up to 0 degrees, and it's a pusher. And then takeoff and landing, we vector that from 0 to 90, and that helps us control the pitch of the Airship. And that's all tied to the side stick via thrust vector control unit.
Okay, you said side stick. That was my next question. So walk us through the different controls that you have in the control surface.
So again, I kind of touch on the 2 modes there that we kind of fly in. So you've got the dynamic mode. So that's just imagine us cruising wherever you see us cruising. We're dynamic mode. So we're just the airflow over the control surface. We have 2 rudder vaders, of course, a rudder, and that's all tied to the side stick. This is all fly-by-wire system, whereas the old ship I flew years ago, that was all cables and pulleys all the way back.
Wow.
But yeah, this is a fly-by-wire. So that's the dynamic flight mode. But of course, you slow a blimp down, and this is, fully vertical takeoff landing. We can put this in confined spaces. It's pretty much made for our base in California. If you've seen where we park it, it's a little tiny plot of land next to the 405 and 110. But as we come in to land or, preparing for takeoff, we have that prop on the back vectored down 90 degrees. As soon as we swivel that prop through 30 degrees, that ties to the thrust vector control unit. So all of your inputs on the side stick are basically changed to thrust inputs to those propellers.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So not only we're using the side vectors, that's a different control where the angle we put those and, thrust levers for those. But all the side sticks, basically that aft engines, that's what gives us so much control as pilots. The old model of Airship, we required about 12 people to launch and land that on the ground. This new model, we can do it with 3.
So there's actually like thruster power levers for the side mounted engines. And then the aft one is only controlled by the stick, and it basically to change your attitude, right?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, there's some special things we can do, but we won't get into the weeds on that. But pretty much it's when that aft engine's pointed down at the ground, it's mostly pitch control. If we're fore and aft on the stick, and left and right, it's tied to that lateral fan to correct for wind shifts.
Let's talk a little bit about the flight instruments. I imagine you're looking at some non-traditional pilot instruments beyond, is there weight or what are you looking at?
Yeah, nothing with weight because it's so variable. I mean, you can take off. I give you a quick example. We'll take off for, say, a day event. We're doing college football, NFL this weekend. We'll take off the heat of the day, sun, whatever, whether it's 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock. You're going to take off and that helium is really warm. So we'll take off possibly a little bit lighter because we know we're going to burn off what we call superheat. So you're going to lose some of that temperature. The helium's going to cool off a bit. You lose lift. So that's kind of a lot of the mental math aspect. And so use a lot of gas laws, specifically Boyle's and Charles' law that explain all this. But all these changes, altitudes, inversions in LA specifically, as we go up in altitude, supposed to normal atmosphere cool off. Well, LA, it doesn't. There's an inversion. So that has a huge effect on an airship. So we might sit over an event pretty heavy, but we have to plan for that because when we come back to land, it might be 10 degrees cooler where we land. And as we descend into that cool air, we gain sometimes 300 kilograms of lift. So you could go from flying a heavy airship to a light airship in 10 minutes.
Wow. And so you're monitoring the temperature, obviously, inside the envelope and outside?
Yeah, we have a helium temperature and then, of course, an outside air temperature. And those combined, whatever the difference is, gives us a superheat reading. Superheat readings are typically, you'll see from -5 to sometimes +30.
Wait, so superheat is basically a ratio then from inside to outside?
Pretty much. It's a difference. So, it's,
Okay.
it's just a difference between the
Okay.
temperatures. And that temperature has a huge effect on lift on an airship. So each degree of superheat in this airship equates to roughly 30 kilograms, 33 kilograms of lift. So each degree that changes makes us lighter or heavier.
And that's not necessarily degree. Well, I guess it's not necessarily the air temperature surrounding the airship, but also the sun, right? Beating on the skin, which then heats the helium internally.
Yeah, I kind of think a greenhouse is the kind of easiest way to
right.
think about it. But how that temperature changes hugely affects pretty much everything. And that's just a constant calculation. We have a superheat reading in there, but nothing on weight. So that's all planned, for the pilot. And that's kind of one of the reasons it takes a while to train him, because that's one of those things, that's hard for, a normal airplane, helicopter, we go into a whole new aspect, and that's all aerostatics. This is the changes. So back to the flight instruments, we've got a Garmin suite. So it's a Garmin G600H, all glass. We've got 9 glass screens in front of us, the normal ESI. We've got the Garmin GTN 650s, push button for our navs. This is fully IFR, VFR day, night. So that's great. And then the ICAS screens, that's the only thing it looks similar, but it's given us all our engine instrument information. And then some of those airship specific pages, where it's the pressure system, the ballonets, the valves, air valves, helium temperature, helium valves, all that kind of stuff.
So can you fly an ILS in this thing?
Yeah, we do it a couple times a month just to stay current.
So how does that?
Do you do it at SFO?
The PRM,
I would like to request the 7-knot approach.
the breakout maneuver in an airship's got to be real.
Yeah, thankfully they're so used. The old ship was IFR, VFR day, night too. So we have to stay current. We don't use it very often. I have to say that. Obviously, if we're going to take off for a TV event and the ceilings are 200 overcast, we can't see the event. So that's But if we need to get somewhere, it's very useful. So it's actually kind of a new certification we just got for this airship. They don't use the IFR in Europe over in Friedrichshafen, but we use it quite a bit out here, and that's just transiting to get somewhere. It might be
Sure.
you might have to do an IFR out of LA, and then you get on top, and then you're cruising all the way to San Francisco.
So how fast would you fly an approach?
We try and be good neighbors. Obviously, like you said, we're not doing an approach at LAX or, Torrance is pretty good with us when they're not busy. That's a big GA airport.
Mm-hmm.
Hawthorne works with us. Fullerton's actually pretty good too. They've got a VOR that we do often there, but ILS into Torrance, they work us in. And the cool thing in an airship though, is if, say they got someone priority or whatever, we'll just offset and hover, and then we can just rejoin the localizer and finish it.
It's like hitting
Yeah,
pause
it's like
on
hitting
the
pause
sim.
on the simulator to take the
Pretty much.
call.
I got to take this call. Hold on.
But that's one of the things when you're flying an airship and you have requests like that, that a lot of the controllers, if they're new and they're not familiar with airships, they don't know what you can do. So, we still do holds and all that stuff, but you could say to them, can we just stop here and just when we
take a break.
we
Just
keep
literally
going?
hold over this intersection
Pretty much
and not move.
Yeah.
Wait, so but like how fast do you fly? Like, just give us like speeds. Like, how fast would you fly an approach when you're going long distance? How fast do you go?
If I'm doing an approach and I'm just doing it for currency, I'm flying it quick. Obviously a training pilot, we're going to keep them a little slower because, wind effects, thermals and stuff, they're not as good. They get a little behind, but, I'll fly them at like 40, 45, which is pretty good speed for an airship. Our top speed, no wind, pretty close to 60.
Okay. So say you're say it gets socked in, you're flying the ILS into wherever, like, do you fly it down to 200 feet and then just stop and kind of take a look? How does that work?
Minimums.
Or do you
stop.
touch down on the runway and stop, or like what?
So that's a good question. And that kind of gets us into the logistics part of being a pilot in an airship. So you can't just land anywhere.
Right.
There's you have a ground crew. Anytime we leave LA, we have a fleet of about 7 or 8 vehicles and 20 to 25 associates that follow us anywhere we go. We need them to land. So to answer your question about the ILS, if we had to do that, then we'd have to, get in contact with the tower and all that. Depending if, there's obstacles around there and because we can hover taxi similar to a helicopter. So depending on the wind, the wind has a huge effect. We could land, worst case, you could, if the airport will allow you and it's not a busy airport, you just park the mass truck on the aiming points and just land, go on the mass truck, and then they'll drive the mass truck with us attached to us.
That's the big old truck with the big boom on it, right? That I saw at Oshkosh
that's it.
Hooks onto the front of the airship. And then they can just literally drive you around and like a tug.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously 360 degrees. We're free to rotate.
And then you got to swing the back end around like the back driver on a big fire truck.
I mean, pilots are controlling
That's
that.
what I mean.
Usually
like you would have to swing the back end around to make a 90-degree turn, right?
Usually we'll just lift the tail, if I'm honest with you. If we're taxiing, depends on the ground. If we're taxiing on
there's an actual tail wheel, right?
Yeah, there's a tail wheel back there. But what we use is that aft engine. You remember 90 degrees vectored down.
Right, so you just pick it up and then just swivel it around. Okay.
Lift it up, and then he'll drag us.
How many main gear are there?
It's just one main right under the pilots, and then there's that aft gear right under the back of the tail there.
Yeah, I was telling Dylan, it's interesting, these tires that I've been trying to get for my airplane, the Goodyear 26-inch tires, and I was reading, and they were actually developed for the Goodyear Blimp, and then they decided it might be good for general aviation too. So now they're you can't even get them right now.
But it's the same
ridiculous back order. Yeah, I guess it's the same tire. From what I understand.
Copper corded Flight Custom 3s.
I don't know. I haven't got it. I can't get them. I would let you know if I could buy them. Bill, it's been a real sore subject the last week and a half. Let me tell you.
You have any extra tires in the hangar there? We'll be right by. So if you had to divert for some reason, you're coordinating this with your crew. They're going to meet you on the ground. And then how many people did you say are in that convoy? Like 20?
It's usually about 20. So covering some of that logistics aspect, we take these and currently, I've flown one of these cross country 9 times back and forth from LA to Akron, Ohio. And that's one of the tough things, logistics. There's a lot of planning that goes into that, not only airport wise, because you have to find airports that are big enough to handle an aircraft of this size. We're longer than most 747s, longer than A380s. We need a 500 to 600 foot diameter swing circle that's clear of obstacles, relatively flat, that it can sit in overnight. So taking, depending on the number of crews. So say we do it one crew, just our crew. So 7 vehicles, that includes 2 mass trucks, obviously aviation backups for backups. So we have 2 mass trucks. We're always between mass trucks. So for safety wise, so I'll send 1 mass truck on the road to wherever we're going 2 hours before the crew even starts. So hour to get us launched. So I've got 3 hours, a mass truck in front of me, well, pretty much along my path. And then of course the launch trucks, we're always between those trucks. So 2 mass trucks, we have a Kenworth tractor trailer, which is basically our rolling mechanic parts shop. We have a bus for the crew. We have 2 vans, TV trailer if we're doing, TV events, a pickup truck, which we can use to kind of secure the tail, the tow bar if we're going in and out of a hangar. And let's see, and a helium trailer. If we're going all the way across the country to Akron, you're going to have to valve helium to get over terrain and have to refill it to get airborne the next day. So that's kind of
so why would you have to release helium? Valving means releasing it, right? So why would you have to release helium to get over terrain? Isn't that what's providing you lift?
Yes. But to give you an example, like right now, for the amount of helium in our airship, and we constantly have to add helium, and we actually purify the helium too. We do that once every month or two, and that's basically we'll suck the helium out of the nose of the blimp, the belly of the blimp, and heat the helium, dry the helium. It's mostly water vapor you're pulling out. So, the purity can only get down to about 94% before it's unairworthy. So obviously we want 99.9, but that's pretty much impossible. So we'll purify it, get it up to, whatever, 98.5 or something like that. And that hugely affects lift as well. So each percent of purity of that helium is roughly 70 kilograms worth of lift. So back to the valving thing, the amount of helium in my blimp right now, we could probably only go to a max altitude of, say, 2,500 feet.
I see. Okay.
So back to the ballonase things, as we climb up, obviously pressure decreases, blah, blah, blah. As that pressure decreases, the helium expands. So we're pulling air out of those ballonase with the valves. And there's an altitude that you get to where those ballonase are flat. We call that pressure height. And that's where the blimp is completely full of helium. To go any higher, think of birthday balloons, right? You let that go, eventually it's going to pop. obviously a blimp's never going to pop because we have valves, but there's that altitude that we know that you're at as a pilot. We can't go any higher unless you're valving helium. And you need to plan all that logistically flying across the country because, of course, you valve helium. Yeah, you can go higher, but you also make yourself heavier.
So roughly what altitude is that? I mean, I realize there's a lot of factors, but if you're full of helium, what would that be?
I mean, right now, I could tell you it's probably with the temperatures outside right now, and that changes everything as well. About 2,500 feet is our max altitude.
Oh, wow.
So if I had to go do an Angels game next week, I'm going to have to plan to valve helium. So we have to get above the Disney TFR, and we kind of sit downwind to base into John Wayne there doing those events. So,
and that's expensive because helium is quite costly in that kind of volume.
Can you save it when you valve it?
No.
Not in flight. The only time we save it is when we do the inspections. So we have these big old nurse bags that are about the size of, I don't know, probably you put maybe 2 car garages, maybe 3 of them on top of, 3 stacked on top. That's probably 1 nurse bag. We need about 7 of those to take all the helium out of the blimp.
Jeez.
Are those outside the hangar?
No, they sit inside the hangar as well.
Now, the purified helium, if you ingest that, does your voice, does it really change a lot, or is it very like a birthday balloon?
It's probably worse because those birthday balloons, heliums are, that's like party grade, so that's probably like 80% or something. But
party grade. It's like the beer we used to drink in college.
Yeah, party grade.
Keystone Light, party grade.
Oh man.
So how much would it cost then to fill the whole airship up?
Man, that's
not your department.
It's tough to say. And I mean, if I had to quote a number, it takes roughly 2 helium tanker trucks. So we've got 9 tubes of helium in one of those trucks, and that'll fill about half a blimp's worth. And to fill probably that tanker truck, you're talking about $100,000, maybe just over, with a varying price of helium. That's a thing. Like you said, we don't like to waste helium, and all the planning that goes into the amount of helium that's in the airship is always coordinated between chief pilot and the crew chief. So it's changing, you have to think about the weight of the airship as overnight as it gets cold. The ship gets really heavy, and depending on the terrain, if it's muddy and it just rains, that aft gear is going to dig in. So there's a lot of factors that you think about that, I talk to pilots about, and they all say like, I had no idea how much is involved. And it's one of those jobs, like you land the thing, you park it. That's not necessarily the end of it. You're worried about weather. It's outside, there's thunderstorms that come through that, that mast truck, even though it's rated to hold the ship up to 90 knots, it requires a skilled watchman to take care of that airship through all the different conditions. Rain, no rain, that's one of the toughest things about that job is it rains, then it gets hot. Arizona's tough with that, of course. Monsoon season, but rains, stops raining, gets hot, and rains again. You're constantly putting weight on and off the blimp.
So, okay. So when you park it, it has to be able to rotate into the wind, right? Like it just rotates on the tail wheel and swings around that truck.
Yeah. The forward gear is actually off the ground. So we lift the mast to keep that forward gear off the ground, and the aft gear is what's running along.
Oh, so you hook it up and then it like hydraulically lifts up and lifts the airship to... Okay.
Yeah, so that mast truck is completely hydraulic controlled. Weighs about 65,000 pounds.
It's a substantial piece of equipment, dude. Because they had it parked right out front of Oshkosh. You weren't there, were you? That was too far east.
I was there.
Oh, you were? Oh, you were just there visiting. You didn't fly that airship that was out front.
No, I was flying.
That was it. Oh,
there is 4 of us there, but one of the pilots had some time off from Ohio, so I joined him and. Like, all right, I've flown an airplane to Oshkosh before, but not a blimp.
Yeah, that's cool. So back to when you say you're underway and you have a mast truck in front and a mast truck in back, and if you have an engine fire or something, right, and you have to like land like now, like what do you do?
I mean, if it's serious, I mean, you're talking like fire or something, right?
Yeah.
Like
say
fire,
one of your engines that's on the side of the...
He has a rope. He just dangles out the canopy and then just slides down. He's good.
I mean, it's one of those things, if it has to be a necessary landing right away. Obviously, we train for that. If it's a serious emergency, yes, we can put it down. We'd valve helium, get the ship on the, do what we need,
Like an airport or a big field? Like what?
Wherever's good. I mean, it depends on the emergency. If I have a very serious emergency and I'm flying, say a flight around LA, it might be best to put it in the ocean if you're flying out there, over there. So it kind of depends on the situation and how serious that would be. But, and not as serious incident, say, you know, you lost a generator or two, or you lost an engine. That's not that serious because, you know, our endurance is typically anytime we're flying, we've got enough fuel on board to fly for at least 15 hours. So, you know, we could wait for wind to calm down. You know, if you lost a certain engine to land, there's a lot of variables that go into decision making on what you do in that situation. But
what if you had to land somewhere and there's no mast truck? Like, you know, we have an emergency, we land, you know, we pull the fire handles and run out of the airplane. What do you do with?
I mean, if you had to do that, a very serious emergency, we'd pick a suitable landing spot and you'd get it on the ground as quickly as possible. And, you know, get passengers depending on the situation. But you'd valve helium at the rate that, you know, they're getting off, so you don't float away, you know. So, yeah, I mean, it's doable, but thankfully that's never happened.
Plus, he carries chocks in the
Well,
back.
I'm just curious of like is there like a big stake bag and you can like stake the nose? I'm just curious, like contingency planning, like what, you know, there's got to be some sort of plan. Like, you know, if you have to leave the airship with no truck to hook it to, like what, you know, what do you do? So
it would just be deflated.
Through my head.
If it worst case scenario, it would just be deflated somewhere. But yeah, it's not like that ESPN commercial, right? Where the actor tied the blimp to a tree or something.
We're good.
And it pulls the
tree. So how long, like, if you're going to fly, what's the longest, like how long are your legs before you just,
if you're doing like a cross country
or something?
So back, I guess, to the example of flying it from here to Akron, one crew, it's about a 10-day trip, good weather. Two crews, this is about the fastest we've done it, which was height of the pandemic, you know, with restrictions and stuff. We did it in 4.5 days with two crews. So that was having kind of grasshopper, you know, one crew gets out, next crew takes it. You've got mass trucks staggered all the way across the country. So you could do, you know, 2, maybe 6-7 hour legs a day. But typically if it's just one crew and we're just flying somewhere, we'll plan for, that's anywhere from 6 to 8 hours of flight time on the airship, which ends up being from, you know, 7 to 9, 10 hours drive time for all the crew on the ground. And then, you know, we'll park it back to the hotel like anyone else and go the next day and truck on.
All right. So, Bill, so you park the airship somewhere, you go to the hotel, and you're at the bar, and you're talking to somebody, and they say, so what do you do or why are you here? Or what do you do for a living? Like, do you actually tell them you fly the Goodyear Blimp? You just tell them like you're a garbage man.
He just says semi-rigid aerostatic. I mean, I don't know if that means anything to you.
Yeah, talk a bunch of gibberish or something, but you know, occasionally we'll do. You know, we have days, and that's one of the great parts is we'll have kind of open house days out and at the various locations, you know, Florida, Ohio, and California. And you get the general public, and you know, no one gets to see these things up close unless you're, you know, Oshkosh, great, yeah. But the general public, not really. So you get to talk to them and answer a bunch of questions, and everyone's smiling. So we do a lot of that. But you know, depending if I feel like talking about blimps or not, and I'll just tell them I'm a tire salesman.
Yeah, it's perfect.
I knew you had to have some sort of alternate.
Yeah.
If you don't want to talk about it,
but,
like, yeah,
I mean, it's technically not a lie. You know, I fly a big billboard.
Yeah.
Right. Lots and lots of rubber. So let's talk a little bit. Well, God, I got so many questions here about the schedule. Like, obviously, you guys have television contracts. There's all of these different sporting events, blimps all over the country. You must have like an entire department or somebody that's working on scheduling all of these different airships for the different events. How does that all work?
Yeah, so we have public relations that take care of all those events. You know, obviously it's not exactly cheap to operate one of these. So back to earlier, why there's not very many blimp pilots in the world is they're kind of very hard and expensive to operate. So you don't need that many pilots or crew members, but it's very specialized. And kind of like I touched on earlier, this TV agreement that we started back in 1955 to provide the aerials, it was kind of a general agreement with networks. You know, we provide this live feed for you for, you know, 3, 4, 5 hours. And then in return, we get some advertising. And that's kind of why we do the big events. You know, you don't see us over very many small ones. You know, it's a big event if you see a Goodyear Blimp overhead.
Got it.
And kind of how that's arranged, you know, they figure that out. That's, you know, back to the schedule, you know, just about any pilot job. If we're really honest, the thing we're all going to complain about is the schedule. And it is dynamic. It doesn't change for the airships. So, you know, like I said, our bread and butter is the TV coverage, whether it's sports or sometimes entertainment. You know, it's kind of nice being based in LA here, as we don't really travel for that TV as much as the other two crews because everything's here. You know, you think about it, we've got Lakers, Clippers, Kings, Dodgers, Angels, Rams, Chargers, USC, UCLA, Golden Globes, Grammys, Oscars. Everything's here for us. So it's quite nice. You're home a lot. But, you know, during playoffs, for instance, you know, baseball playoffs or NBA playoffs, everyone on the crew knows that time of year, depending on how the teams are doing, you know, there's circumstances where, you know, we're waiting for this result of the game on whatever Friday night. We might be going to San Francisco tomorrow. Depends on who wins, you know, so
Right.
that's just sports broadcasting, you know, so it's certain times a year you kind of expect it.
And I mean, that's got to be tough too, because like you're saying, it's not like it's a 3-hour flight to get to your destination. So like you got to be ready to go.
Right. And I mean, the weather planning is just, I can't stress how important that is. You know, it's important in anything in aviation, of course, but for airships, how susceptible they are to weather, whether that's flying or on the mast. You know, I'm not going to take this airship somewhere where they're forecasting hail. You know, we've got like carbon fiber fins, and that's, you know, it's just a nightmare. So you're not only thinking about that weather just for the flight, you're thinking about it for the whole duration you're there. So and of course, winds, all the normal stuff. Flying up to San Francisco is one of the tougher ones because you're going through 5 or 6 different microclimates, all different weather and all. So it's challenging.
Funny story. This summer, Max, I was driving my kids' family vacation up to Oregon, and I saw the Goodyear Blimp going up to San Francisco, and I sent Bill a message on LinkedIn. I'm like, "Is that you?" And he's like, "Yep."
It's up the coast. Would you just fly up the coast?
Think you were. I'm not sure. I was on the I-5, and I could see you to the west of the I-5. I'm not sure if you were over the water or not, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of thing as you're thinking, you know, we fly all the way to Akron, and our route, you know, we have to go south. We can't go over the Rockies. That's too high. Our max altitude's about 10, and, you know, highest I've been since I've been here, it's about 5,500. And that's basically altitude you need to clear El Paso, that area right near the border there. But same thing, you know, flying up to San Francisco, we can't go over, you know, direct. So, you know, our route up to San Francisco is typically, we'll go along the coast all the way up to usually Santa Barbara, Goleta, around there, and then cut in 101 and then head up the valley through Salinas, King City, and Livermore.
So do you guys just not go to Denver?
Nope. Never been an airship in Denver.
Okay, so let's walk us through like a typical day. Let's say we're going to do a Dodger game. What does that look like? When do you know, if the game's at 7 p.m., when do you have to start getting everything going? And talk a little bit about who's actually on the blimp on a normal TV shoot, who coordinates the shots you're doing, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. So if we're doing a Dodger game, 7 p.m., so the first aspect of that is I have a chief broadcasting technician and 3 broadcasting techs. So a question we always get asked is, do you bring the network guys on with their cameras to do everything? Well, quick and short is no, we do everything ourselves. So all of that gear we put on the blimp. So, and then we send 2 technicians to the site. So the first part, if we're, you know, at a 7 o'clock game tonight, is I'll have 2 technicians start. I don't know, depending on traffic. Of course, this is LA. They might start at 1 or 2 p.m. to head up to Dodger Stadium, set up all the antennas, the site gear, run the lines, fiber cable, talk to the network director, the tech managers, all that, make sure they're set up to receive our signal. And crew start, we'll say 4 p.m. So the launch crew will start. And that'll include, of course, a couple pilots. We've got the crew chief. You'll have, it could be any variety of broadcast techs, obviously one that runs the camera. We'll have mechanics, usually a day shift mechanic, just in case we run into any issues. And then we have general crewmen as well as the other position. And we also have heavy duty mechanics. So they fix all our diesel trucks. So any conglomeration of those, they'll typically be maybe five crew other than the pilots. And of course, we'll determine the fuel load, get that ready. And that's another thing you might quickly touch on. You're fueling the blimp while it's moving, of course. It's attached to that mast truck, but of course it's rotating with the wind. So we use, you know, a Bowser, and we're driving and moving the blimp as you're fueling it. So you need the right conditions to do that. So we fuel the ship up, obviously pre-flight. We'll run all our weight and balance numbers and weather and all the normal stuff, flight risk assessment. And then we probably launch for Dodger Stadium. That's maybe probably a 15-minute flight, calm wind up there. So we'd launch to be overhead an hour before the event. It's typically what the network requests. So overhead at 6, we'd launch about 5:45, you know, cruise along the harbor route underneath all that LAX traffic inbound. That's what the helicopters do. And you get overhead, of course, on board again, we've got the pilot, and obviously we'll designate just like normal, you know, PIC, and then pilot monitoring. And we switch off every hour. There's no autopilot. So whether it's right seat, left seat, we switch off every hour just for fatigue, because you're constantly flying an airship. You're never not moving something when you're flying. So anyways, yeah, we have a camera technician on board as well. I forgot to mention too, as we're fueling, we get all that done. We've also loaded all the camera gear if that's not already on board already. So we have a special equipment electronic rack that runs our 4K HDR gyroscopically stabilized camera. So that's probably the same one as you guys have seen on news helicopters or similar to. So that sits out under the nose of the gondola there underneath the pilot's feet. So the broadcast tech has full control of that camera behind us. And then one of those ICAST screens when we're overhead. So the bottom, usually engine instruments, we can change that to the live camera feed. So the pilots have a view of what we're seeing as well. You know, you're not just pilots, you're talking to air traffic control, position reports, airspace, TFR waivers, all that stuff. But you're also a photographer. You're getting the right sun angle, shadow, satellite feeds, all that stuff.
God. So at the end of something like that, so you have to be able to come back at night, right? Is it challenging putting it, what do you call it? Landing it? Mooring it? I don't even know.
Yeah. Landing and then going on the mast at night. We do that all the time. Same thing, you know, night currency. We gotta stay up on that. And, you know, we have a landing light. It's a little bit different because it's directional, probably similar to a helicopter. You know, you can move that around if you're not familiar with the area, for instance. But obviously we do night landings all the time at our base, but it's so maneuverable, like a helicopter. We can set it straight down. And it's obviously just like, we like 10 knots, steady wind, non-changing direction, just like any other pilot.
Sure.
Makes it real easy.
So what's the maximum wind like on the field that you can, when you have
about 25 knots?
25 is the max. Okay.
25 knots. But of course there's consideration if we're doing passenger rides and stuff. If it's real shifty or gusty, then maybe a little lower. You know, we want everyone to have a good experience on board. I really like to keep it this way, is everyone's smiling getting on my aircraft and they're smiling getting off. I want to keep it that way. So,
So how big is that gondola?
Oh, just under probably 40 feet. So, I mean, max passengers is 10 plus 2 pilots. But getting back into some of that aerostatics and the lift and time of year, typically we're taking a maximum of maybe 7 or 8, depending on the time of year. And that just has to do with the amount of lift.
And there's a lav and galley and stuff?
Just a lav.
Just a lav.
Yep.
Subway. You just
pack a Subway on those long legs, those 8-hour legs for 4 days in a row.
Pretty much. Yeah, bring your lunch or dinner. But it's really nice, though. There's a settee back there, too. So when you're on your hour off and take your lunch break, you can sit on this seat in the back of that gondola there, and there's a 270-degree wraparound visual, and you get to eat your dinner there with a nice view.
Oh, that's
yeah.
Makes your meatball sub taste better, I guess. So, Bill, can you talk? I mean, you kind of mentioned you guys will go on some really long trips. You talked a little bit about the day trip, you know, to shoot a game. What are some of the long trips that you guys?
Some of the other missions. So I talked about going all the way across the country. So there's planning that starts usually months in advance for that, booking airports, making sure they're okay to handle us. We talked about TV, a passenger day, you know, just real quick covering that. You know, if we're doing, say, some customer rides, whether it's a tire dealer, you know, maybe some executives or a client, you know, that we're doing a lot of business with, as a way to say thank you. You know, you get some rides on the blimp and they make a day out of it. So it might be 6 to 8 rides, usually anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour each. Usually split the difference, and 45 minutes is a good length for a blimp ride. And we'll switch off pilots, you know, each do a ride and talking to the people in the back. You know, as soon as you take off, you'll go back and chat with them, answer all the questions so the other pilot can fly. But a long day, I guess. So covering a bit about, you know, a trip across the country, probably the first across two or 3 legs eastbound are probably the hardest. And conversely, of course, the last 2 or 3 legs westbound are the hardest, just due to the terrain.
Right.
So, you know, a normal flight from here to Tucson, for instance, we usually use Marana down there, just past Kirby's Strip. And, you know, no wind, that could be maybe 6.5 hours. Pretty easy. But if the Santa Anas are kicking, that could be 14 hours.
And are you gone from your house? Like, could you be gone for weeks at a time during a busy sports season, like the playoffs or something like that? Or is it? Yeah. Really?
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't done it recently due to obviously the current state of the world, but we've in the past done summer tours. So we'll be gone for a month. Back in the day, it used to be 2 or 3 months. You just be on, touring the country, going to places that, we don't go a lot. So it's, that's what they called it, summer tour. So last one we did, we went all the way up to Vancouver. And that's probably a favorite place to fly in the country, Pacific Northwest. And you're in a blimp, you're slow, you're not that high. So you get to really enjoy the scenery.
That's so cool. So he's saying he's titanium at Marriott and diamond at Hilton, I think is kind of what he's sort of alluding to.
Yes, yeah. Spend a lot of time in hotels, but
that's right. So as far as landing, I imagine, you mentioned that there's different ways that you can land. Are there any other special considerations you have to make in landing, maybe like high altitude?
Yeah. So these trips, like I mentioned, these first 2 or 3 legs that we do to Tucson, Tucson's 2,000 feet. And the next leg's usually Deming, New Mexico. And that's like 4,300 feet. So to go from those altitudes, you need a specific amount of helium to get airborne. So we may or may not, depending on temperatures, have valved helium just to get over Banning, past Palm Springs to Tucson. But you get the volume that you need to take off out of Tucson with our tracker trailer full of helium. And then we get over the hill, make our way up. And it's a challenging flight because you're not high above the ground. If you ever see that from I-10 or something, it's pretty interesting. You see a blimp just cruising along there, 500 feet, just especially when it's hot. If we're doing this in June, it's even further exacerbated because those high temperatures are carrying a lot of superheat across the desert. But anyways, we valve the amount that we need to. But when you get to that, there's a certain number that usually we have in our heads that, all right, this is the number we can valve to and still be okay to land. Yeah. But it's still going to be on the edge. So kind of the edge of limits for operational limits of at that altitude, at that temperature. So when we're landing at Deming, it's one of those challenging landings that you're right on the edge of trim and you're right at the edge of weights. It's if you had a wind shift and you had to get airborne again, this is the only aircraft we do emergency takeoffs in. You get a wind shift. And that can be one of those factors at those high altitude airports that is high on your mind.
So you'll come in and you kind of know you've got one shot to make this work in a way.
In a way, yeah. To be on the limits of trim, there's a way you could get out, but it's one of those, it's at the limit. But, we've done it 9 times safely. And obviously weather is the main factor with shifty winds and stuff, but there's a lot of space at Deming, so it's not too bad. And the thing is, you can land, and that it's not always fixed, that mast truck. So we can land somewhere, and wait for the ship to stabilize out with their wind direction if it's shifting around, and then we'll drive the truck in when it's safe to do so, which is kind of nice. Just drive it in, put the outriggers down, and winch us on with a hydraulic winch.
So what airport do you use in the Phoenix area? I'm just curious.
Goodyear.
Yeah. Obviously.
Duh.
That was a dumb question.
Should have seen that one coming.
I've flown into the airport in Akron that you guys use. It's not CAK, it's the other one. AKN? What is it?
Akron Fulton.
Akron Fulton, yeah, I've been in there. You don't go in there anymore?
We'll do approaches there, but that hangar, that big old blimp hangar there from the 30s, the air dock, I think Google's using that for their development process there. So we have a special, I think the aeronautical charts call it balloon port, but our blimp base, it's 4 Oscar Hotel 6. So that's Wingfoot Lake. And it's kind of they call it the Kitty Hawk of lighter than air flight. That hangar's been there for 104 years. It's an 800 foot long hangar.
Jeez. No way.
It's pretty cool. It's kind of between CAC and Akron Fulton.
Okay. I'll have to look for that next time. Good stuff.
You'll see it flying into CAC. It's easy to notice.
So, I mean, I think what my takeaway from this is you think Goodyear Blimp pilot, awesome. But it sounds like it's like a small army you really have of people that are supporting this. And you're one of the puzzle pieces, but there's many to make this happen.
Yes, indeed. And, just about every interview I do, I can't touch that enough. It's these 20 or 24 people, they're all very unique jobs, but it's also one of those very, very highly skilled, we're trying to get away from the tribal knowledge where, you just pass it on and you know how to do it, but, you document this and it's all in manuals so you can learn it. But some of that, of course, just like any position, you're going to learn a lot from, as a pilot, flying with different pilots, of course, different instructors. But the people that support this, akin to whether it's corporate, mechanics, it's very specialized to be an airship mechanic. They're the only mechanics that work on the aircraft while it's moving, for one. So, again, it's always moving around the mast. So all night long, we'll land kind of if I go back to that TV event. So we do that Dodger game. We'll land at whatever, 10:30 at night. Mechanics might start their shift at maybe 9 p.m. And they come in and they have to do a post flight after each flight. So these mechanics will hoist these platforms up to the engine gondolas and do their inspections, whether it's 50, 100 hours, change the oil. But they're strapped in with safety gear, of course. Safety is paramount at Goodyear. But they're strapped in and they'll do their work, and the ship's always moving around the mast. So it's definitely safer than the older blimps we used to fly where the engines were attached to the gondola. So when you're adding oil to those and say you have something as simple as a whirlwind come through, well, that can lift the ship up and take it around the mast quite quickly. So they're skilled in their positions. But
do you guys ever use drones to get up and do any inspections or anything to see the top of the blimp or anything like that?
There has been talk about that. I think there's certain companies, the cargo airships is kind of one of those things they're developing still in process for the future with the green initiatives and all that. So there's some that are capable of doing it. We don't do that. So for instance, if we need to do an inspection of the top of the envelope, if you've seen a bunch of birds land up there, some have some small holes that they make with their, so we'll hold the airship in good wind conditions, usually middle of the night. We'll hold the airship with some vehicles, kind of tether it to the back, and we'll go up on scissor lifts or boom lifts. And that's one way mechanics can do their inspections and repair holes.
Do you ever, with a new guy, just hand him a rope and be like, just hold this, don't move, don't even tell him it's hooked up to cars, and just be like, this is critical.
Yeah.
We hired you because you're
don't let
strong.
go.
Yeah.
That's probably one thing you learn first day is you never, ever let your feet leave the ground working with a blimp. But no, back to that it's everyone, I kind of touched on this throughout the interview, but everyone has their very specific position. And as with a lot in aviation, it takes a very solid chain to make an operation run. And, I don't think I mentioned too much, but if you didn't know, there's somebody watching all Goodyear blimps 24 hours a day. So that's called pressure watch. And they go through almost as much training as pilots do. So they're trusted to watch this blimp, on their shift. We have, split 3 ways, 8-hour shifts. And they're trusted to watch this blimp and keep it in a safe condition every day of the year. Even when it's in a hangar, there's somebody watching that blimp, adjusting the ballast, the trim, fuel, fore and aft, weight on, weight off, taking readings every hour. I can't say enough about the crews that make these ships fly.
So what powers it when it's just sitting there all night to be able to do all that?
Yeah, it's same thing with aviation, backups for backups. So normally we're powered by the shore power, which is provided underground through some cabling, of course. That goes up, connects to the mast truck, and then goes up to the top of the mast. And that hooks, again, free to rotate 360 degrees. So that kind of runs along the belly of the ship to the car. We have a GPU on there with batteries, of course, if that fails. So a lot of backups for backups. So city power, of course, if for some reason that failed, power outage, we can start the mast truck. There's a generator on that mast truck that'll run power to the ship. If that fails, we've got a Kenworth tractor trailer that can run a cable out and run power to the ship. If that one fails, there's another generator on the mast truck that we can run power to the ship. That fails, there's batteries on there. Worst case, you're at level 5 or 6. Call a pilot, come start the engines till you can fix it.
Wow.
So there's always electrical power, and that's, you'll see a lot of that. Max, you probably saw it out in Oshkosh, all those orange and yellow things hanging off the blimp when it's not flying. That's all the ground support equipment that basically keeps the thing inflated. It's kind of like a life support. When this blimp, when any blimp has helium in it, it's kind of a living and breathing thing. So you're taking care of it.
When's the last time you flew a fixed wing airplane?
Probably a couple of years ago. 150.
Was it weird getting back in a fixed wing airplane?
150 is the only thing that flies the same speed, so you're probably
You just had to tell the guy, like, hey, just make sure I don't try and hover this thing, man.
Make sure I don't get too slow.
I need to take a break here. So how many blimp pilots are there in the world? There can't be that many. I mean, it's 100?
Well, I always use that media. There's always way more astronauts than there are blimp pilots. But kind of like what I said, there's not many any blimps. You don't need that many pilots. Currently right now with Goodyear, we have 10 in this country, and we're kind of the only regularly active blimp operation. Aside from that, we have three in this country. We've got one branded flying with obviously our manufacturer, Zeppelin. They're based out of Friedrichshafen, Germany. They have 2, so that's 5 Zeppelins. And I think there might be one in Australia, maybe one in Asia that fly occasionally. So probably 7 blimps in the world, and active pilots, I'd probably guess 20, 25.
It's unbelievable.
Plus, there's an FAA like resource that comes out to give you guys check rides and stuff, right?
Yeah. So to finish that training standing, kind of how we have that base, 3 stages, you get through that. Once you're done with the admiral emergencies, we do the normal kind of simulated check with one of the instructors. We have 3 instructors. 2 are based in Ohio, and I'm the one based West Coast. And then they'll take an FAA ride. So the only FAA designated examiner for airships is, it's actually my boss is the chief pilot for all of the operations. So again, one of those things, there's not that many airships, so you can't really have that many DPs because there's none active. So he maintains that, and kind of how that's done. To try and make a long story short, when I was going through the differences training for this Zeppelin, we had an FAA. I can't remember what they call them. They have a special name for the guys that go out and kind of inspect the programs.
POI
and the ratings and
maybe, or something?
Something like that. But yeah, he was going through the program at the same time as me. So it's kind of one of those weird things, being the niche that is airships, that we train the FAA how to fly our airship so he could make sure we're checking ourselves how that's so so
I'm surprised they don't just go, look, just do whatever.
Listen.
We don't care. Honestly, it's too much.
This is too much.
We don't understand how it works. It's just, you guys just do your thing.
Just superheat. I'm done. I'm done with this superheat.
Superheat. It was too much.
No, he's a great guy though. He went through the full training, and it's one of those things. If you're not flying it very often, but he has a good grip on how we operate and our safety program. And that's worth mentioning too. There's no other airship operations that are ISBAO certified. And we just did that in the last year. So we're working through the different stages. So we have a pretty robust safety program, just like any other corporate flight department.
The one thing I forgot to ask, what does one cost?
I mean, my answer for Goodyear, of course, is that they're priceless because they're the Goodyear blimp. But this is easily, you can search on anywhere online. They're about $30 million just for the airship.
Well, so it's built in Germany, but how do you get it here?
We build all of ours in Akron.
So they just send the parts. So it's like a kit, and then they assemble it.
Essentially, but we're so kind of bringing this full circle. Those older ships that we used to fly, the GZs, right? Goodyear Zeppelin. This partnership existed in the 1920s. That's kind of how we built those huge airships in this country that kind of served as aerial aircraft carriers. So we had a partnership with Zeppelin, of course. That fizzled out for obvious reasons in the next decade or two. But we started working with them the last 10 years or so for this transition to their fleet. We made a few small changes to their designs, to be able to accommodate what we need, the TV coverage, different electronics. That Garmin suite, that was pretty much our instructors going through, and this is what we want in it. And some beefing up of some of the frames in the aft so we can hold with mules for hangar entry and exit. So there's been some changes, and that's kind of how you run with it.
All right. This is going to be hard for you, Bill, because we want to hear some good stories from you. And I imagine you've got many. So you got to narrow it down here. What do you got for us? I
guess the one, I mentioned that we did an international trip in an airship, and that was quite interesting. So we went up to Vancouver, our point of land. We had a dealer. I think it was an anniversary for a dealer up there, and it was Abbotsford, so just east of Vancouver. So, anyways, we went up there and had a good time doing all the rides for this Canada operation. That's a beautiful place to fly to, up Vancouver in the mountains. Just up north to the east of there. Anyways, heading back, anytime we go across the border, international, we go across up, on the East Coast, Ottawa way as well. But when we cross with a border in an airship, and you've obviously got all your paperwork in order, which can be quite extensive, especially if you're planning on doing some TV for all the planning documents you need. But anyways, we'll hover the airship over the border while we're watching our 8 vehicles on the ground there go through the checkpoint, right? So we're not gonna cross the border if I don't have my crew with me, right?
You're waiting for a light gun signal to pass.
But It's pretty funny though, because you're hovering down there, you're watching your crew, like, all right, they're talking to them and talking to U.S. Customs, like, all right, and you see them looking up too. You see the customs agent, like, what are you guys doing here with all these Goodyear logo vehicles? And they point up. You go, where was that guy? Anyways, clear. Okay, they cross the border and we land to get a specialized airport that the agents come out and inspect us. So U.S. Customs Border and Protection guys came out, inspected us, and they took a picture in front of the blimp, and we made the newsletter that month. Pretty funny.
That's awesome. I can you imagine like going through the border with a huge helium truck and just be like, yeah, this is fine. There's a huge birthday party going on up here. We're headed to.
What about when you land? You go call CanPass. We just landed.
We did that.
Yeah. Did they come out or they just be like, just get out?
It's fine.
You're all right. We know what you're doing. You're a blimp.
Is there any liquor on board?
But I mean, it is extensive, the planning that we do for those international trips. I mean, we have to have inventory manifests for just about every single vehicle. It's a lot. It's a lot, but it's.
So you're so low. Are you actually talking to this like Albuquerque Center or whoever when you're flying cross country?
Usually we're not talking to anyone, and unless we're flying through airspace. I mean, we can if we want, but a lot of blimp pilots, if you fly through certain amounts of airspace, you're gonna have to answer a lot of questions about blimps while you're flying. You might just skirt in between a couple borders there.
Like, I'm just a tire salesman. I don't know anything.
They know you're there. They can see you. They see us way before we see them. But yeah.
Have you ever, while you're maybe hovering or going really slowly, have any craft or any like animals or anything like come and check you out or anything?
Well,
I don't know, like birds like come around. I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see birds. They're really good at avoiding us. They get close on occasion, and as far as aircraft go across the country, Oshkosh, getting close to Oshkosh, going in there, and that's pretty cool being a blimp because they let us do the helicopter arrival, so we don't have to talk to anyone, and we just stay low, and we're very easily visible, being that big, so you don't have to do position reports when you fly airships.
This is
but animals haven't really had an issue.
Okay. Well, I was just birds, I just thought.
Yeah, I just didn't know what kind of animal.
I should have said bird.
Like an antelope galloping across. Like,
there's low, the mountains. I don't know. That's funny.
I mean, you see a lot. I
was going to say, you probably see a lot of wildlife on the ground while you're cruising.
Yeah. I mean, been flying for coming up on 20 years. Never hit a bird, but I hit a coyote up at Grand Canyon.
What? Are you serious? How does that happen?
Yeah, I tell that story to passengers a lot. Never hit a bird, but I hit a coyote. But can't remember the name of the airport. Maybe it was that one just south. Was
Valley?
It Clark?
Oh,
Valley.
Clark's Williams Valley.
Nah, it was Valley. Yeah, it was. I did a lot of night instrument instruction when I was there, and we were in the DA-42 Twin Star, and I was probably it was pitch black up there in northern Arizona, just south of the Grand Canyon. We're doing an instant approach into Valley, did the old touch and go, and probably about 60, 70 knots, had this impact, and it felt like we hit a pothole, and you're like,
dude,
what the heck
I thought
was
you were
that?
talking about in the blimp. I'm like, that's why I was like, how does that happen? Like you're
No.
I'm like, with what? The one tire on the
Yeah, you think back to that Austin Powers.
I mean, it had to be you see just a coyote just looking up at you and just running.
Just like, come on, man.
That's what I was thinking. I was like,
just run the Goodyear tire over his nose.
Glad we cleared that up.
Yeah, that was good. Literally a touch and go on the coyote. Oh man! All right, Bill. Well, this has been fascinating.
Wait, I just have one more question, Bill.
Okay,
would you say that you travel to the Emmys with the largest entourage, or is it Jay-Z and Beyonce?
I'd probably say Jay-Z and Beyonce on that one.
All right, that's all I had. Yeah, I'm good.
No, okay, thank you for clearing that up, Bill. We really appreciate. This is definitely fascinating. Hopefully, I mean, it sounds like you have to talk a lot about this and explain the same things over and over. So I'll just give you a little link and then you can just send them to this podcast. Maybe we'll make your life a little better. I don't know.
I think there's probably a YouTube video just as long somewhere too, or gave a talk, but yeah, hopefully people like it. It's a different part of aviation.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. So if there is a listener that is listening to this and goes, man, this is awesome. This is exactly what I want to do. What would you recommend to maybe somebody that's a student or just getting their career started that actually wanted to pursue a career like this? Is there anything they can do to move
Is there
towards
an intern program?
Yeah.
No intern program, but I mean the hand flying stuff is obviously critical. Just a feel. I mean, it's gotten a lot better with this new model of Airship, but our previous rate of pilots that we bring in and that made it all the way through training, the old Airships is probably like 65-70%. We'd bring in ex-Navy fighter pilots that did carrier landings, but they didn't make it through training because it's so much of if you can't keep this thing on wind, if you don't have a feel for that, it's not going to work. You just got to keep it on wind. So it's more of a feel thing. It's hard to explain, but it's had all kinds of pilots, you name it, Blackhawk, ex-Blackhawk, and we've had just about anyone. It's kind of a feel thing.
There you go. All right. I learned a new word today. It's called superheat.
Yeah. You'd think living in Arizona, we'd know what superheat is, but
it's a different kind.
A whole new meaning.
Man, that last trip across, we landed in, it was Goodyear. It's 117 degrees Fahrenheit. Oh, man.
A lot of superheat.
That's some
What was the
superheat.
superheat number?
Yeah.
Really high. Really high.
All right, Bill. Well, it's been great talking to you. We'll have a link to your LinkedIn profile if people want to ask you more annoying questions that you can answer the same
thanks,
six
Dylan.
questions over again.
Well, at least you have to figure that at least we ask some questions that like he probably gets the layman questions like a million times.
Yeah.
But
No, some more of the pilot specific ones, and I could go on for this stuff for hours and hours in depth, but hopefully we just hit the nail a bit.
Yeah,
hopefully
you
this
crushed it.
Hopefully this is the last time.
Yeah, until next month, and then we'll do this again.
All right, Bill. Thanks so much, man.
All right, man.
Appreciate
See
it.
you guys.
Right rudder. You know how it is out here, man.
It's been a while, Max, since we've talked about the Moose. Do you have some updates for us?
The Moose flies.
Oh,
Yeah, I did the first flight in it. What was that? Was that yesterday?
I think so.
Yeah, yesterday. Seems like so long ago.
I was like pre-flighting the jet, and I got a FaceTime from your wife, which is not very common. And I'm like, what? I had to ignore it because I was in pre-flighting. And then later on, she texted me the FlightAware link. And I'm like, oh, Max is doing his first flight.
That was one of the most intense flights I've ever done. I mean, when you do all this work and ground runs and all this, tons of time and money and the whole thing, and it all culminates holding short of the runway, being like, dude, like I've never flown this airplane. This airplane's never flown. I've never flown this type of airplane. And it's all coming to fruition right now.
Were you listening to Danger Zone? No?
No, I was I was in the danger zone. Literally. I wasn't on the highway. I'd already reached there. So you just, I don't know. You just
Full send, bro.
You just kind of do it. And so I took off, and the airplane, it has a lot of power. So I wasn't even at full power. I never intended on going to full power. Yeah. I was going at this other power settings below that anyway. But I mean, I wasn't even there, and airplane pops off the ground like shorter than I even anticipated. Because again, a lot of people have flown this airplane, but no one's flown this one with the wing that I have on here, because I have those leading edge cuffs and some other stuff on it that nobody that I know of has it. So I didn't really know quite what to expect, but it pops off the ground. And right as it leaves the ground, the window pops open, which is like the Cessna window. You can fly with it open.
You're right.
But it's just, you already kind of have your hands full. And, and then all of a sudden, the thing pops open.
Wait, the one on your side or on the passenger side?
No, on my side. And so...
Perfect. Did you just stick your elbow out like a trucker?
So it's super loud, right? Now I can't hear the tower. I'm like, so I whatever. I'm just, luckily... I remember the Cirrus crash where the guy crashed here in Scottsdale.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was jacking around with the door that popped open. Yeah. And so I just ignored it and flew and got up to some altitude. And now I can't hear the tower because all the wind noise. And I'm like, and I had the G3X, G-Wiz touchscreen. Yeah. And I'm like trying to figure out how to turn the volume up. I can't figure out how to turn the volume up. Like in the moment. So I can't barely hear the guy. And I latch the window again. Once I get to safe altitude, it pops right back open. And like in retrospect, I look at it now. I'm like, I could have just rotated a little further. There's no way it would have come open, but I was just kind of just doing what I've done.
You had your hands full.
So I ended up flying the whole flight with the window open.
It's a power move.
I actually have I had room in the panel, so I put an extra like regular radio with knobs and stuff on it. So I just grabbed the volume knob and that turned it up. So that solved that problem.
Okay.
And so now I basically did orbits over the airport in the traffic pattern, but above the traffic pattern. So I'd fly downwind, close base over the runway. The point was to be close enough that if anything happened, I could.
It's kind of like what our boy Bill does in the blimp, just circling the stadium.
So I did that for a while and then came in to land for the first time and was like, I don't know. At that point, you're kind of already on tensed up, and focused on kind of watching everything, what's going on, make sure this thing flies right and doesn't roll left, right, do anything weird. And then, so I just came in, with carrying more airspeed than you normally would, and just landed, and was glad that was over.
What was the status of your shirt after that?
No, I wasn't sweating because the window was open the whole time. There was a lot of airflow. So that was the first flight. My wife was watching. She's crying the whole time.
Oh my God, I bet.
It was a whole thing. And I didn't really tell anyone I was going to do it on purpose, just because I didn't want the pressure. Like, my mom's going to want to come. And I didn't need that. So it was good, but the airplane flew really well. It didn't want to roll or do anything weird. It takes a lot of rudder. Motor runs hot because it's new. It's still breaking in. So I was struggling to keep the motor. My tachometer is not indicating properly. So that's the whole thing. It's just, but overall, honestly, there's no real major issue. So I go to this morning. I haven't told you this. So I go to fly this morning, and I put more gas because I was going to orbit the airport for a little bit, just make sure everything was still good, and then I was going to depart the area, climb up. Do some verify my airspeeds indicating correctly and some stuff in the flight test cards, right? So I put a bunch of gas in it. So I taxi out and I take off. It's like really early in the morning. It's like 6:30 or 7 or something. And I get on the runway and I pop up this time. And now I kind of had a little more what to expect. So I add power, pop the tail up.
Does it get off the tail pretty quick?
Oh yeah. Dude, if you, I don't even know what's going to happen when I hammer it to full power, because it's four. Like I told, if you guys haven't heard, it's a 9-cylinder radial, as supercharged, and I souped it up a little bit, so it's like 415 horsepower, somewhere around there, and it's pretty light. The airplane's super light right now, right? That's why I put more gas in it too. I was like, I just want to make this thing not perform quite as well, right? And so I add power real slow, and again, not to full power. Pop the tail up, and and then rotate and fly off, and everything's fine. I'm on the up one. I'm like, I feel something on my shoulder. I'm like, what's that? I'm like, that's weird. And I feel it again, and I'm still pretty low to the ground, so I'm just focusing on flying. And I start smelling avgas, and I'm like,
oh no.
And I look up over my right shoulder, and there's a vent line that comes into the cabin. It's leaking fuel. So since the fuel was full, it came into the vent line. There's a fitting that was loose, and it's now leaking fuel all over me.
Did you have to put your cigarette out then?
I threw it out the windows. It was still
smart.
open. No,
yeah, smart.
So I'm like, oh boy. So I told the tower I was going to orbit the airport like 3 times and then depart to the northeast. Yeah. So I'm on the airplane. I'm like, 7 Mike Kilo, I need to just come back and land. He's like, well, do you need to land like 2.5, meaning like turn around and land right away? Or I'm like, no, it's fine. I can go around for 7. And so, because it wasn't like gushing down, but it's like more, not a drip, but like a slow trickle, maybe I'd say.
Okay.
So I'm getting soaked with avgas. So I opened the little vent on my window to get some airflow in here, because it starts to stink pretty bad. And I'm on the downwind, and I'm just like, what are you going to do? You just got to like tune it out, right?
Yeah.
That you're showering in avgas. So I flew the downwind and came and landed and taxied in and shut down.
Give your wife a huge hug.
No, she wasn't there. She wasn't there for this one. It's just by myself. So I went in and grabbed a 5/8 wrench and tightened up the fitting. I forgot to tighten at some point, and moved out smartly.
Wow! And you went back up?
No. I'd had enough at that point. I was just like, let's just let's just put it away.
Let's just take it easy.
Just again tomorrow. There's no rush.
Wow.
So that's flight 2.
Well, you smell pretty. I don't smell any avgas.
It's interesting. Avgas, you don't. It's not like regular gasoline.
Yeah.
You know how you can't get the smell off your hands. This, I mean, you can smell.
I do smell a
Faint
little
smell
bit.
of avgas,
Yeah, it's
but
not
it's
that
not
bad.
like overpowering. I asked my wife to bring me another shirt, and she like forgot, and I was like, do I stink? And she's like, no. So it's weird. I don't know.
Wow. Well,
So that's flight 2.
congratulations.
It's so cool though. So the one thing I'll add, and then we can move on, is with these new avionics. So I did that first flight,
Yeah.
and I landed, and you're basically like, I have no idea what just happened. Like you
Yeah.
just, you know, the details of anything are just kind of lost. And what's awesome is you pop out an SD card, you take it home, you put it in your computer, and you upload it to. There's a website, or you can do it on Garmin's like logbook software, or just on the web-based one. You upload it, and it shows you a map of where you went, right? Overlaid on whatever chart. It shows you the flight display. You can see if the ball is centered, your airspeed, your true airspeed, outside air temperature, ground speed, every engine instrument, every EGT, every CHT, oil pressure, fuel level, everything.
So glad this didn't exist when I was in flight training.
So awesome, because then you put it in, you basically watch the whole thing happen again. You're like, you can see like what happened.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
It's really cool. It's super helpful.
So flight testing continues. What do you got to fly, like 40 hours or something in this thing?
Yeah, 40 hours.
Okay.
So it's just there's a EA has a whole program, and you
Yeah.
have cards, and you plan. I mean, you got to plan it out. And like the next one is you fly a box pattern. You record your true airspeed, or you know your airspeed and your ground speed, and then you do the averages to figure out how accurate your airspeed is, your indicated airspeed, which it's pretty easy in mine because it calculates true airspeed for you and has it all up there, you know, so it's not quite as much number crunching, but you still need to validate that you don't have big airspeed. Like my system is, the integrity's been checked by a pedostatic check, you know, on the ground, but you don't know what errors you have flying, right? So check that, and then you got to do stalls and all that stuff, and CG changes and a whole bunch.
Man.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's challenging. It's fun.
Yeah, I bet. You're like a test pilot.
Yeah,
You basically
essentially. Yeah, and I don't know what it stalls at. I don't know any of that because of the change in the wing. Like you can't just look at what somebody else who built the same airplane, because it's
right. It's
not
a
the same
totally
airplane.
different wing.
So it'll be interesting.
Danger zone.
It's not, but it's not. I say it's not that dangerous. It's really not that dangerous.
No.
Like but I'll tell you what. Doing that as a guy that has 150 or 200 hours and and 3 hours of tailwheel time, or something like that, like, and even just the window popping open or something, like that's one of those things I think with experience, you learn what to pay attention to and what to specifically not pay attention to. And I think with lower, like people that are doing that with a lot less time, chronologically and flight time and experience. Like I have a lot of time, not a lot, but a couple 100 hours in tailwheels.
You sound like Captain George now.
Yeah, right. Listen, I've been to 6 continents, but I don't know. I thought about that after I landed. I'm like,
for someone that's actually built the plane, if something like the window pops or there's something loose, there's got to be a temptation like, I can fix this because I know what's going on, versus like someone like me who really doesn't. Like if I'm flying an airplane and something breaks, it's like, this thing's broken. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like,
I started to think, I'm like, why is it popped open? Like I've done engine runs on the ground. Who knows
exactly.
The torque for the motor change or the airflow over the window at high power set. Who knows why? But
interesting.
Just enough.
Well, we're glad you safely returned.
Yeah, I'm still here for one more episode.
That's right. Please refrain from smoking.
Next week is up in the air.
Yeah. Refrain from smoking cigars tonight, maybe.
God.
And we'll look forward to the next Moose update. I think that's going to do it. That was a pretty healthy show.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
We've got a lot of ground to cover. Another episode coming for you in a couple of weeks. But until then, remember,
flexibility.
It's the key to moose building.
It's the
moose
key to
flying.
test flying experimental aircraft.
See you guys and gals in a couple weeks.
Hopefully I'll see you next time.
All right.
Vanguard.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.